Hi there, Chris from TotallyEV, and here I'm joined with Dunstan Power. He's Director of BiteSnap Design and Versanetic. Dunstan, thank you so much for joining us on the call
Hi,
today.
hello.
So if you could tell us a little bit about BiteSnap Design and of course Versanetic as well, a little bit of information about the two companies.
Of course, yeah. So, BiteSnap Design, we're a consultancy based in Birmingham in the UK, and our specialism is designing embedded systems. So, effectively, electronic products and the software that goes on the electronic products. We founded in 2008. We've got 30 employees now, majority of which are engineers, either software or electronic engineers. And we do a number of things. We do electronics design from feasibility studies right through to getting things into production. And on the software side, we do software to go in embedded devices, microcontrollers. We do Linux and Android board support packages. So that's configuring that operating system for the hardware. And then we do mobile phone apps as well and application development for the embedded systems. We've got a lot of experience with electric vehicles, charging systems. Originally, we did work in the Olympics for London Olympics for 2012. We developed the communications and controller for the chargers that went into the Olympics. And that gave us a lot of experience, which was then built upon by us writing software updates and getting OCPP targeted to those chargers and the similar types of chargers that were put elsewhere around the country at petrol station, to service stations, sorry. And then subsequent to that, we ended up doing other EV charging work because, as you can imagine, as a consultancy, you tend to build on experience you get in one sector. Other people then ask you to do similar sorts of things. So we ended up doing charger work for other companies. And 2 years ago, we set out on creating a V2G system with 3 other consortium partners. And we got the first fully working end-to-end vehicle-to-grid system in the UK at Shaston University, which we won an EV award for last week, which we're very, very pleased about. As a spin out of that, we've developed hardware, which I'll tell you a bit about. Basically, it's built upon our EV charging experience, and so we decided we had a number of customers coming to us asking us to do the same sort of thing, which was developing smart charger controllers for existing chargers. And that combined with the V2G work we'd done, we were getting so much EV work, we've decided to set up a business within BiteSnap called Versanetic, which is completely focused on creating sort of versatile, bespoke EV chargers or other bits of charging infrastructure around the chargers.
Interesting. So I've got a picture behind me of some chargers that you've created with tree stumps. So explain a little bit about your involvement in this respect, just expanding on that EV chargers. And also furthermore, are all the employees, you said 30 employees at BiteSnap Design, are they also all working across them, or have you got a dedicated team within the 30 who are working on EVs specifically?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, basically, we've got some people who have worked almost exclusively on EV work now for the last 3 years. But really, the real strength we've got in Versanetic at the moment is the ability to draw on the whole team. So if we were trying to create this as just a completely standalone business at this point, we'd have to hire quite a lot of people to do that, whereas instead we're able to draw upon expertise right across the company. So a lot of people within BiteSnap have had their fingers in Versanetic, but yes, there is a core team that pretty much exclusively work on Versanetic products.
So Dunstan, what's with the tree chargers? What's what kind of gives, and obviously what's behind me right now? Can you give us a little bit more information about that?
Yeah, so I think that they were inspired by going around a trade show for the EV charger industry, and I just walked past plastic box after plastic box after plastic pillar after, and there was just this sort of uniformity of what chargers were like. And the point of Versanetic is we're trying to be versatile about chargers, and we want to get the message across to people that, you know, chargers don't have to just be one size fits all. And so yeah, we just came up with the idea about, you know, how about we build a charger into a tree just to show actually you don't have to be in a plastic box. You don't have, you can think differently, basically. So yes, we got a woodsmith carpenter to basically create us two chargers, and those are real, you know, sockets. They've got the boards in. Effectively, we created two working chargers built into trees. Basically, it's a marketing piece. You know, these aren't real products. It's just we're not going to the business of selling cutting down forests and building chargers into them. That wouldn't be very eco-friendly. It's just really to get across to people that you know, free your mind and you know, use our components. You can create something a bit different.
Maybe in the future you might see it actually, because there might be some trees which are actually, you know, rotting, for example, and they're not going to be actually used, and they could be repurposed. But then I don't know how that work with electricity.
Yeah. It would be that'd be quite expensive chargers if you were going to mass produce them. But hey, there might be people out there who really want their chargers to look like a tree. So everything has its price.
Brilliant, thanks for that. And what made you do the EV stuff? So you explained in terms of the 2012 Olympics, but what made you actually go, actually, we need a new division, we really need to focus on this?
Yeah, I think we could see the opportunity. We were being asked to do the same thing more than once. So by companies who maybe also didn't want to take all the development risks themselves. So the standard consultancy model is customer comes to you with a requirement spec, please can you design this for me? We say, yes, that'll cost you X amount, and they say, okay. And at the end of it, you give them what you've designed, and they go away, and hopefully they'll come back and after a while and ask you to do something else. And that's your standard model. But occasionally, obviously, you get people coming along saying, I'd like you to design this, but you know, I'd rather you took the risk and effectively we pay you a license fee or whatever. Now, that can be attractive if it's an area you know about and you're confident in. And that's basically what we had. We had a number of customers who were willing to take some financial share, but didn't want to take the full thing. So because we were being asked for a similar thing by more than one person, and you know, we had some expertise in the market and understood the market, we thought it was a good opportunity for us to actually create more of a sort of product company within ByteSnap, basically, so we could develop core IP and then resell it to multiple people.
Interesting. And so if for those who might not be aware, would you mind explaining the V2G kind of structure as to why it's important as well in terms of providing energy back to the grid as well, and also in terms of the demand potentially that you've seen in terms of providing a V2G charging network? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So if we look at just charger evolution, the oldest chargers, and still a huge number of the chargers on people's driveways, are dumb chargers. So effectively all they do is they're glorified sockets. You plug your car in, the car says, I want this amount of current, and it just provides it. It just hooks the car up to the mains, basically. And all it does is it's there for safety primarily, to stop people getting electrocuted. So the problem with that is that if everyone's got a dumb charger on their drive and he'll go to work during the day and he'll come home at 6 o'clock in the evening and plug their car into charge for 8 hours, you've got a serious grid problem, because that's a big demand on a local grid. So this has been recognised quite early on. And the answer, the short-term answer to that is smart charging rather than vehicle to grid. So this is effectively where the charger is connected to the internet, and someone, could be an energy provider, it could be some other party, but someone has the ability to control the charger to say, no, you can't charge at 6 p.m. You've got to wait till 10 p.m. or you can only charge at 50% or whatever. So that's smart charging. Vehicle to grid takes us one step further. What if everyone turns their kettle on after the end of, a football match, and you get a big surge in power, and at the time you've got lots of cars hooked in and charging? Well, V2G allows the car to actually push energy back into the building or ultimately into the grid. So vehicles, there's V2B, which is basically where the car is offsetting the energy the house is using, but the house is always a net user of energy. And there's V2G, which is literally where the car could actually be pushing energy back into the grid being used by someone else.
That's a great explanation. I was just also potentially want to add to that, and of course, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's more to, other than also just fluctuating in terms of grid, consumers could potentially gain a lot of money in terms of charging a little bit off, like say off grid, but off time, off peak times, and therefore reducing the load on the grid, and benefiting from cheaper tariffs and ultimately cheaper refueling.
I think the other important thing about this is, if we look at this from a grid-centric point of view rather than a car-centric point of view, the problem the grid's got in the future is actually renewable energy is lumpy and can't be stored. It's the main issue with it. So it's either windy or it's not windy, and you can't store that energy easily. So it's been recognised quite a long time ago that cars are effectively just big batteries on wheels. So why not use the cars to store renewable energy? And that's another, coming from the grid perspective, it's actually a benefit to have the V2G and to have all these cars connected. It's actually solving a problem that the grid has potentially. So it's quite an exciting innovation. And as you rightly say, though, the consumer has to be bought into it. What's in it for them? Well, what's in it for them is that if they get paid for that electricity that's getting pulled out of their car during a peak, i.e. expensive time, they could actually make money from it and, effectively end up driving at a much lower cost than if they're just using what's like a dumb charger.
So now, while I could speak about the subject for hours with you, and I'm sure we'll geek out about it, let's bring it back in terms of obviously what you guys do, and how does your implementation work, and how does it also differ from what other competitors do, if any, in terms of if you've identified any?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So I think the first thing to say is that Gridcentric, we're not a EV charger manufacturer. We're not planning to be an EV charger manufacturer. There's a lot of great EV charger manufacturers in the UK and in other countries. So what we're aiming to do is we're creating effectively sub-assemblies, components that make up chargers to allow those EV charger manufacturers or maybe large installers or whoever it is to make their own EV charger to fit a bespoke need. Because what we've found is we've had companies coming to us who have a requirement that doesn't fit around your standard charger. And the reason for this is that the biggest market for chargers by far is just your domestic charger that goes on a wall on a driveway. And there's huge competition in that area, and there's going to be huge demand. There's a big market opportunity. So I think the companies serving that area can do very well. But there's also a bit of a race to the bottom. It's very price competitive. And, that's not something that Gridcentric particularly, we're aiming to serve that piece of the market. What we're finding is there's plenty of other instances that aren't really met by that sort of basic charger, and it needs something a bit more bespoke. So for instance, it could be solving the problem of on-street parking, where you might have chargers actually buried under the street or built into street furniture, or it could be the example of a sort of a car park where you've got lots of bays you want to put chargers in, but you don't want to have individual post chargers on every bay. You might want to have a single communications controller in one place and something cut down on each bay. So those are just another one is a solar portal, where you've got a portal with large solar arrays all over the top, for instance, and you want to mix that energy in with grid energy and build chargers into it, rather than again having chargers sort of slapped on the back, maybe for aesthetic reasons. So what we've seen is that it's potentially a very large market, the EV charging market, and it's not only like any large market. There's going to be lots of requirements, from bespoke requirements for people, and ByteSnap, it has been all about meeting bespoke requirements of customers. And so Versanetic, we see ourselves doing the same in the charger market.
That's interesting. In terms of Versanetic, then, in terms of going forwards, as you said about, say, potentially wireless chargers of sorts, are your solutions also future-proof? So are they something that people could also, not just in terms of scalability, but in terms of adopting in terms of different types of chargers? So let's say, for example, you've got, as you said, wireless chargers, or even, let's say, 250 kilowatt chargers in the future and things like that. Is that something that you guys can scale up to?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And again, it's something we could talk about for hours, because I see, if we look at the evolution of chargers, at one end, if you look at charger horror stories of people messing around with cables in the rain at night and then trying to get an application to enable it, and it's not a great experience. I see the end game being like, you get in your car, you drive into a space, shut your door, walk away. So you don't actually touch anything. And the car does all the communication with the charger, which is, as you say, wirelessly coupled. And so that's the nirvana, I think, for sort of charging is for somebody just to be able to just park and go. Taxi drivers to be able to sit in a taxi rank, it's charging, and then they drive off. I mean, we're a long way away from that, but there's lots of clever people around the world thinking about how are we going to do that? What do we need in place? And things like 15118 is a standard for the vehicle to charger communications. That's a step in the direction. And likewise, there's companies doing research and development in wireless charging. Now, our blocks, we've got a set of charging blocks. We've got one called Manta Ray, which is a smart charge controller. And effectively, that's a Linux single board computer, which has been particularly set up to meet the needs of chargers. And that initially, actually, the very first chargers that went in are actual DC vehicle to grid chargers. So, i.e. a non-standard charger. But then subsequently, they're in a more standard sort of domestic type charger. So that board could effectively go into whatever you like. Our other blocks are more geared around destination chargers. So we've got EEL, which is a single socket charge controller, and can, as I say, it basically does that dumb charger function within the charger. And then we've got a bunch of other boards for things like RFID scanning, display, LEDs, things like that you might need within a charger. But we've got plans for the future to keep developing this. It's not something where we're just going to say that's it. We've got lots and lots of ideas we've got for 2021 and beyond.
Which is great to hear. And then do you feel there's any sort of challenges that either you've currently faced, or there's that you are looking in the future and thinking actually that's going to be quite a challenge to develop a system for, I don't know, a certain area or certain types of vehicles or certain infrastructures even?
I think there's obviously EV mostly focused on consumer domestic vehicles, light vehicles, cars, maybe light vans. There's clearly a big challenge in the industry around what about trucks, commercial vehicles, buses, things like that. So, we're keen to meet the challenge of charger developments in that sort of area, because again, that very much is part of this sort of bespoke, higher value charger development. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, say, developing super, high power DC chargers, that's not something that we're planning to do at the moment. We need to partner with people who develop the inverters and the high voltage side of that, basically.
Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, maybe they'll become more prominent in the future. I think that's my kind of biggest complaint, I would say, in terms of charging infrastructure, is the fact that they're not uniform across the country, at least not in the UK, and I'd say pretty much throughout the world. They're not uniform in terms of which charging port you use, or even no charging port, as you said, in terms of wireless charging. I think we'll be a way off that until all councils and governments integrate them. But
yeah, we've got the old sort of Betamax VHS thing, for instance, with CHAdeMO. Whether that will survive, the Leaf uses it, the others are using CCS chargers, sockets. You always have this problem with standards in in any industry. Electronics is guilty as any for having big players sitting on particular standards, and the standards are evolving a lot as well, and also the government regulations and requirements around charger installation, subsidies, this sort of thing. So there's a lot going on at the government level, not just in the UK, of course, but throughout the world. And one of the challenges really is that in Europe, the market's quite fragmented, because even though you've got the European Union, there's still different standards in different countries on the continent between, say, Germany, Holland, obviously the UK, and they have slightly different regulations around chargers and what you can and can't do. So it's a bit of a nightmare for the big charger companies trying to find a one-size-fits-all charger that meets everyone's requirements. And this is, again, where Gridcentric comes in. We're trying to develop components to allow companies to fill the gap. Even if they have a mainstream charger for one geography, they might want to do a more bespoke charger to meet another territory or particular need, and that's the sort of place we can help out. And really, by using our blocks, you're basically just saving a lot of time to market. That's the main thing.
Interesting. And also, just to ask, and I guess finally, in terms of the markets you guys operate in, obviously a UK-based company, if I'm not mistaken. Do you guys also operate across the world, or Europe, or UK, or is it?
Well, I mean, ByteSnap, we've got customers, certainly in the US, Canada, quite a number of European countries, and Australia as well. And Gridcentric, we've been getting inquiries from all over the world, frankly, South America, North America, Southeast Asia, Australia, Europe, so it's a very international market. And particularly on the software side, we're getting inquiries in from all over. And in fact, our very first customer for Gridcentric was actually in Holland, not in the UK.
Almost no surprise, because their infrastructure system over there is just a little bit more advanced than in the UK.
They are, yeah, they are leading ahead of the game really, and that's where OCPP was born, was in Holland. So yeah, they are the leaders in Europe.
Excellent. Well, if there's anything else, is there anything else you'd like to add? I think I've covered all my questions, but is there anything else you feel like I have missed out? Obviously, we could speak for hours on the subject, but is there anything you want to add in terms of what you guys do?
Well, I think only, I'll have to get a sales pitch in really. Just we'd obviously love to hear from people who've got requirements. And just to explain, the three things. Firstly, electronics hardware. We've got blocks for that. Secondly, software. We've got libraries for that. And then finally, consultancy. So we've got the experience to do bespoke systems for people and to tailor hardware and software for customers' needs. So give us a call.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, if people are interested, they can check out links in the description below. They'll go straight to your website and then they can inquire. And Dustin, thank you so much for your time. And
thank you.
And look forward to seeing your systems or tinkering around with them potentially.
Seeing the trees.
Yeah. I'll be chopping them down and see what's inside. All right,
brilliant.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.